Everyone, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, TEDx. Thank you, Imarticus. I'm not sure if I'm necessarily a guiding beacon, but I certainly try to stay for the next 10 minutes or so. Tuned in here, online and offline. Thank you so much for joining, giving me this opportunity. So let's think through what are we talking about in terms of reimagining EdTech, school education landscape in India. And just some numbers, and apologies if these are too many numbers for a Wednesday morning, but in India, we have roughly 255 million students who are in the school-going age group. Last time I checked, if that was a country, that would be the fifth largest country in the world. That's how many children we have to educate in our school education system. What are we doing for them? We have 1.5 million schools in this country, right? There are about 1 million government schools and about 500,000 private, aided, unaided schools. If I do some simple math, what that tells me is a little less than 200 students per school is what you would get if you just simply divide the two, right? Sounds quite achievable. Sounds pretty good so far, that there is a large volume, a large quantity of students, but also a large quantity of schools. And therefore, everyone should be able to manage to teach high quality teaching education for school students. Our GER, which is the Gross Enrollment Ratio, which effectively means everybody who is in the school-going age group, are they actually in school or not, right? For primary grades, that GER percentage is above 100%, which means that students who should have been in grade 4, grade 5, but somehow missed the opportunity, have actually gone back to school and started doing it, and which is why you get greater than 100% as our gross enrollment ratio. Of course, the story starts to change as you go from pre-primary to primary to secondary to higher secondary. By the time we hit higher secondary, we are already talking about just about 60% GER, which is still okay, right? So the quantity here is perhaps not the issue. What is? First and foremost, infrastructure, right? So I'm giving you just a very simple stat here, a simple metric to say there are 27,000 schools in this country today that have something missing, right? Now, what is this something, you ask? This something could be library. This something could be a computer lab. This something, and this is the really hard-hitting one. When I found this out, I felt extremely apologetic for these students. But there are 6,000 schools today in our country that do not have a school building. Let me pause there for a second. I know it's a hard one to digest. There are 6,000 schools that do not have a school building. So that is one part of the challenge that we are dealing with. That yes, there are 1.5 million schools, but do they necessarily have the wherewithal, the things that are required for good, high-quality education? The other problem, and again, we are in a day where we are discussing reimagining EdTech. EdTech means tech means computers, internet, etc. There are still 40% schools in our country that do not have computers. Certainly not for school students' usage. There could be a single computer in the admin department, which is taking care of all the students' data, the salaries, etc., but certainly not for students to use. If I now tell you about the internet availability in schools, that 40% goes up to 65%. 65% schools do not have internet facilities for their students to use. So what is all of this telling us? This is telling us that while yes, at the face of it, seems like quantity is not a challenge in school education in India, quality certainly is. Let me tell you the one that, again, I find the reason in 2009 when India participated in PISA rankings, PISA scores. Sorry again, people, but we were 73rd out of 74 countries that have participated. We were above only Kyrgyzstan. Again, it was 2009. I'm pretty sure now if we did the same PISA rankings and scores, our students, and I really hope and fingers crossed, they would fare much better. Why don't they fare better is something that you see in the blue box down below, right? We have 500,000 plus teacher shortages, right? We are missing those teachers. Those seats are vacant. As you go up, which is where I was telling you the gross enrollment ratio drops to about 60% for higher secondary. As you move up, there are 40% secondary schools that do not even have 6 teachers, which is the mandated requirement by the government. What is all of this telling us? Yes, quantity might be okay. quality is certainly suffering. Whether you think about quality of infrastructure, whether you think about quality of outcomes and hence the PISA scores, whether you think about quality of the teachers, both availability and quality of teachers that are there. So that's the story of school education in our country. Let's talk a little bit, therefore, about higher education. So what are the numbers there? Today, we have roughly 42 million students enrolled in higher education, right? How many HEIs or higher education institutes are there? There are 56,000 higher education institutes in the country. Again, 1,100 universities, 44,000 colleges, 11,000 institutes giving postgraduate programs. Okay. All in all, there are 56,000 HEIs in the country today. Again, if I do brute force math, right, on these numbers, this means any HEI today has roughly about 750 students. Again, my argument remains the same. Does that sound like a manageable number? If I've opened a college or an institute, should I be able to give high quality education to at least 750 students? Sounds about okay, isn't it? Let's see why that problem from a quantity standpoint becomes an issue. First thing, in higher education, our GER, where we started above 100%, dropped to about 60% in higher secondary of schools. That further drops to just about 27.6, I think is the exact percentage, drops to about 28%, which means what? All students who are in the age group of college-going students, only 28% of them are actually enrolled in a college. So if all of us were to go outside on the streets of Mumbai and meet 10 people who are in this right age group of college-going kids, actually you'll find only 3 of them are even enrolled in a college. Whether they go to that college, another story. Do they attend classes? Very different story. Have they ever learned anything? That's another TED Talk, right? That number, if you think about I'm not even going to go to the developed world where in some countries that number is actually 72, 73, 75%. Korea is sitting at a 75% GER for higher education, which means 7.5 students, let's say give or take 7 or 8 kids out of every 10 is in college. Our government's aspiration, and I'm sure in this audience, a lot of you have read the NEP or at least excerpts of it. Our higher education ministry, our government wants this 28% number to go up to 50% by 2035, right? Good aspiration to have. Let's not aim the 75% just yet. Let's try and at least double from where we are. Get to 50%. That, by the way, would mean we have to add 35 million more seats in our higher education system in this country. Now, again, for those who are thinking, my God, these are big numbers, Avantika, just break it down for us. Let me do that for you, right? Pre-independence to 2023, we have opened 56,000 colleges, correct? If we were to get to another 35 million seats in colleges, right, we will need to open another 46,000 colleges in this country between now and 2035. If you ask me, and perhaps I'm a pessimist, that is not going to happen, right? It is just not possible to open 46,000 new colleges, universities, institutes, academies, what have you, right? That problem, again, so clearly this seems like there's a quantity issue in our country, right? If we want more and more students to go to college, to go to universities, they will have to be more avenues for them. Why is it that today they don't go to college? It is perhaps poverty and lack of affordability for some. It is lack of access for the others. I can afford it, but there is nothing in my hometown which is good enough for me to actually go to. For many, it is the competitive nature of our higher education ecosystem, right? I have the money, there is a college close by, I just didn't get in, right? I couldn't make it. So how do we then make 35 million more students somehow into colleges and into universities, right? The bigger problem here, which I'm sure everybody sitting in front of me does go through at some level, is the employability of these people. So one problem is, how do we add this quantity? Quite another is this pool of students that is coming out year after year after year, and all of us hire them. Do they have the right kind of skills, or are we having to kind of retrain them as soon as they come out of college. And I'm pretty sure, hand on heart, if I ask all of you the question, there has been some unlearning and relearning that you've had to do for all the employees that you have hired, right? So the problem, therefore, becomes this. At an India level, at an overall level, while our unemployment ratio and rates have been going down, which is great news, hurrah. We used to be at a 10%, then dropped to about 8.5. We are at a 6.5 today, right? Pretty good. However, look at the second part of the statement. Back in 21-22, some work was done and we realized that 42% of India's graduates that are under 25 are actually unemployed. Again, partly jobs, lack of jobs, but largely because of lack of skill, right? And I'll touch upon that skills piece again. So net, and apologies if this is a gloom and doom story, there's a lot of good that is happening. There's a lot of, infrastructure capacity that is being added. We all know how many IITs and IIMs are being opened as we speak, right? All of that is wonderful. Is that going to be able to tackle a lot of these issues around higher ed and the ones that I spoke about in school education? We are not quite there yet. And which is where reimagining EdTech becomes quite relevant, right? But before I jump to the technology part of it, let's start to think, what would I do, right? And what is my almost kind of what I'm calling a two-part agenda? How do we fix a lot of this, right? Out of the two parts, one is elevating the role of the teacher, right? So for anyone here or listening otherwise, if we think technology is going to replace the teacher, 100% not. It will never happen. It should never happen. Can I just say that, right? Teacher has the most important role, irrespective of what kind of course or program are you going through. Are you a school student? Are you a undergrad student, postgrad student, what have you, right? So what do we need to do? Today, for many school teachers and college teachers, becoming a teacher or a faculty is plan B, right? And again, I'm sure there are some people who will say, no, I'm a teacher out of choice. Of course you are. But I'm talking about everybody here. I'm talking about the large majority, right? Government school teachers, given I work in this sector so much, they toss up between Patwari, block development officer, sub-inspector, grade 3 teacher. If you think about how government school teachers are actually making it to a government school, it is by writing these 4-5 different exams. So they're hedging. They're saying, let me just write a sub-inspector exam, a grade 3 teacher exam, a Patwari exam. Let's figure out which to ho jayega, right? That's how we are hiring our government school teachers. Private school story is not very different, by the way. I work with some of the largest national school chains in the country. And if you ask the founders, CEOs, investors of these companies, many of them will tell you teaching is not plan A. Plan A was IT, bank job, BPO, KPO. Plan A was all of this. If none of those happen, I'm going to become a teacher. And can I just say, I think the students deserve better. The students deserve to have teachers who want to be teachers in the first place, right? Who are passionate about teaching. Why does that not happen? Large part of the problem is pay scale, benefits, work life, and even societal respect. We are in a country where guru-shishya relationship used to be the most prominent, the most respected relationship, right? There's almost this social fabric that many of us have grown up with. I don't think that exists anymore. Right? So we need to, in terms of giving to the teachers, we need to make sure their pay scales, their benefits, their societal respect is brought back, but also hold them accountable, right, for student outcomes. If they are not able to meet the expectations of the students, the parents, the institutes that have hired them, there needs to be some level of accountability, right? So that both of them go hand in hand. The other thing we need to do on teachers is let them, and which is why I've called it elevating the role of teachers. Let teachers redefine the curriculum, the pedagogy, the assessment. There is almost too much of lack of flexibility, and there's a lot more rigidity now in both our school and higher education system on here's what you have to teach, here's how you have to teach, and this is how you assess whether it's working or not working. I don't think that's fair. I'll give you my own example. And look, on K-12, of course, there should be learning aids, etc. Focus should be on conceptual strengthening as opposed to, how to crack an entrance exam. Get the concepts right at school level. Get the foundation, get the fundamentals right. That's your job as a teacher. If that foundation is so strong, irrespective of whether it was IIT JEE entrance exam or SAT or, further in life, a GMAT, a CAT or whatever, if the foundation was strong, the student is going to be able to answer any question, no matter how difficult, right? On the higher education side, and I think this is one that I feel extremely passionately about, we need to be able to balance knowledge with skills. There's a lot of, higher education directors, and, you're soon going to hear from some of them. I think there is an over-indexing on, there's a lot of knowledge in my head as a professor. I need to somehow, my job is to transfer all that knowledge into your head as a student, right? I don't think that's enough. Is it important? Yes. Are we over-indexing into knowledge and therefore ignoring and neglecting skills? Absolutely. My own example, I went to one of premier business schools in the country today, right? I graduated, I joined a top-tier management consulting, a strategy consulting firm. There were 58 of us, I still remember, and I'm talking 10 years ago. There were 58 of us from, the best business schools that you can imagine in the country. We were all good students, and that's why this top-tier strategy consulting firm picked us, right? First few months, first few projects, our learning curve was perhaps this steep. It felt very tough, let me tell you. It felt very difficult for majority of us. And maybe I'm slow, but there were many others, I'm telling you, who also felt exactly the same. That, hang on, I went to the best business school. I did really well in that business school, and therefore I got a day 0, 8 a.m. offer, right? Why is it that I'm struggling now? Why is it that this job is seeming so difficult for me, right? That stayed with me when I moved to Australia, and I lived in Sydney for 5 years, and I used to teach at University of New South Wales, where what I noticed then was at a UNSW, there are courses on private equity. There's a course on venture capitalism. There's a course on investment banking. There's a course on management consulting. And therefore, 3 years ago, when I returned back to India, I just felt the first thing I owe back to the business schools is, if half the batch in any business school wants to become a management consultant, let's teach that to them. So 3 years ago, I created a course that balances, at least in my mind, and we should check with the students, that tries to balance, let me put it that way, knowledge with skills. So that the learning curve that was this steep for me, which felt like climbing a mountain every single day, at least becomes this steep for them. It'll still be hard. I don't think in a 30-hour course I can make my students the best management consultants ever. I cannot, right? But I can just get their journey a little bit smoother than mine is the objective, right? So now let me jump to the last part, which is therefore, where does reimagining EdTech come into all of this, right? Technology can only play a role when we do the left-hand side. So all the EdTech founders in the room, all the EdTech, people who are focusing on digitizing education, please do remember you can only do that when you expand the definition of what a teacher is in the first place, and you elevate the role of the teacher like I spoke before. Very quickly then, what can technology do? Technology, in my mind, can be all three things. It can be a great teaching assistant, it can be a great tutor, and it can be an amazing assessor. And let me just work with some quick examples on all of them. As a teaching assistant, so now I teach at IIM Calcutta, I teach a course on management consulting, like I said. The cap on the number of students is 100, right? Which means there are 100 students sitting in a big lecture theater, and there is me trying to solve a case study for them using the board, right? No matter what font size I write in, I don't think the guy or girl right at the end is ever going to be able to read what I've written on the board, right? It every single time breaks my heart when I'm teaching a difficult concept, and after 5 minutes of me talking, a student raises his or her hand and says, What have you written there? It just absolutely crushes my spirit. And I'm a weekend professor, right? Because I do a day job Monday to Friday. It crushes my spirit that this is a Sunday morning now. I've given it my all. I'm trying to explain a very difficult topic. And all the student cares about is what was that word written on the board that I can't read. Why? Because in this scheme of trying to make notes, because, she might ask that in an exam, the concept is lost. You're only focusing on noting down those keywords. How nice would it be if there is a teaching assistant, if there is technology that could actually just take some of these notes for you so that you can really focus on what is the concept that is being taught, right? Role of tutor. Again, I'll probably work with my own example once more. In my job, I at some point felt I needed to understand public policy, right? And I did a course from who can teach public policy really well. I thought, oh, London School of Economics sounds like a great idea. But I can't take time off and now become a student at this age and stage of life. I could do a course very easily thanks to EdTech upskilling providers who basically said, look, you're looking for something, we can give you that something on demand. I'm an everyday Duolingo user. I practice Spanish 10 to 15 minutes every day, right? Now, Duolingo knows that I really struggle with present continuous tense in Spanish. Oh my God, it gets me every time, right? So I can say, yo leo libros, which is I read books. You ask me, I am reading. How will you say that, Avantika? Tough. Duolingo knows that, right? Every practice that it makes me do, every time it makes me speak, so do an oral exercise, it's all linked to them knowing or the app knowing that my present continuous tense in Spanish is weak. For everybody who has kids here, I don't want to put you on the spot, but how many of you think we are in Maharashtra, so your kid's Marathi teacher actually knows what exactly in Marathi does your kid struggle with? Ask that question to yourselves. I'm pretty sure Duolingo knows better. Last one, assessor. And recently, some students in a business school told me that when you are given, 4 options and a MCQ as a exam paper, they do this with each other. A, B, C, D. So no matter how clever an invigilator you are, if I just did this, you don't even know I'm saying answer to question 1 is A. I've just done this. Answer to question 2 is B. And here we are so worried that ChatGPT and Gen AI and whatnot is, getting students to cheat more and copy more, etc., etc., etc. What are we talking about? If you use technology for some of these MCQ type examinations, you can randomize the questions, you can randomize the options. You can't do this. You can't get away with this. Because the option B in your question paper is different from the option B in the person's question paper that you try to cheat with. Right? What are we talking about? As a professor myself, my exams are open book, open notes, open Google. Because I am not trying to test open Excel spreadsheet so that you can do all your calculations on Excel. I am not trying to test your ability to use Excel here. I'm trying to, as a management consultant, I'm trying to assess your ability to, 1, ask the right questions, 2, research, analyze, problem solve for me. That's not something that Excel will throw at you, right? So, long story short, technology has many, 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 many advantages. It can work as a great TA, a great tutor, and an amazing assessor. So everybody who is worried about using technology, my short answer is don't. And the last piece is, of course, as employers, our job is to make sure that we are hiring keeping all of these principles in mind. I don't think we can then take a higher or completely opposite stance when it comes to both the role of the teacher as well as the role of technology. Thank you so much, everyone, for being a very patient audience. I know I've gone over time, so thank you.